Hey guys, how's it going and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to show you more about protocol-oriented programming and how we can structure a very simple or rather badly written MVC app architecture into an MVVM. Okay, so we're going to apply some protocol-oriented principles, and of course the purpose of transforming it into an MVVM architecture is so that we can write good unit tests. In other words, we want to make our code testable, so that our code is robust, and when our teammate breaks our code, the CI will catch it. Alright, so for today's video, I'm using a new microphone, the Rode Wireless Go, instead of the usual Blue Yeti Nano that I have. I still love this microphone, but I'm gonna try this wireless one so that I can freely express myself. Alright, so let's get started. So if you see on my screen right now, I have my Xcode open, and this is a very simple Xcode project over here. So you see there's this class that says user view controller, and this is the kind of code that is pretty typical. So let me walk you through what we have over here. Alright, so I'm going to make this project available to you, so in case you want to download it and just code along with this lesson and tutorial, feel free to do that. And I really believe that by doing that, it will really aid you to become a better developer if you do not know how to write MVVM and you do not know how to structure code that is testable. So many times the reason why unit tests might seem quite difficult to write, I had that problem right at the start, and it's because the code is not being structured for unit tests. Okay, and I'm going to show you one, which is this one we are seeing right now, which is not structured for unit tests. Okay, so let me walk you through. So the project name is called protocol-oriented programming. So if you see over here, I have 3 files. So the app delegate is not relevant over here. I have the scene delegate, and what I've done over here is that I programmatically create the view controller, so I don't use any storyboard over here. So if you see over here, my root view controller is the user view controller, which is this guy over here. Okay, so let me just make this a little bit bigger, and I have added the service classes at the bottom. So if you see, if I scroll down, I have the API manager over here, and yes, this is the very popular beginner pattern for API manager, where it's always defaulted to some kind of singleton. Alright, so as you can see, we have static let shed over here, the private init, and we have a function over here that says fetch user, so very straightforward. And then this function returns a completion handler that returns a result. So if it's the success case, you get a user, otherwise you get an error. Okay, so right at the bottom, I have a strut to represent the JSON response, which is this guy over here, and then I have a model, which is the user model. Okay, that has 3 properties: ID, email, and avatar. So I'm making this example as simple as possible so that I can really elaborate on the principles of how you can structure it. Okay, so if you look into this implementation inside the fetch user function, you see that I have a URL over here. And let's see what this endpoint does. Okay, so let me just open this and just paste this inside over here. And if you see over here, this is a mock API. So of course, if you want to just play around, you can come over here and you can see that you can just play around with some of these endpoints over here. And let me just come back to this. So over here, I have data. Okay, so this node contains one particular information, which is the ID, email, first name, last name, and avatar, which is a URL string. All right, so basically this returns to us like a user information. Okay, so let's come back to here. So what we do is we are going to use URL session to make the API call, and then we will decode the JSON into the user response. Okay, however, note that what we are really interested in is not the response, but rather the model, which is the user model. And therefore, the result return type is user. And what we do is that after we decode this into the user response, what we are really interested in is just the data property. And that's why you see this over here. Okay, so this should be pretty straightforward. If it's successful, we return the user. Otherwise, we'll just return some kind of failure, some kind of error over here. Okay, so let's come back to the view controller. Okay, so this is the this project has only one view controller, which is the image view, which is the user view controller. So you can think of this as, most of the apps have some kind of profile page, and then when you go to the profile page, if the user is being logged in, you'll see your avatar as well as maybe your email address or your user ID or username. Okay, so over here I have two views here. I have an image view and I have a UI label. So nothing fanciful. I'm creating this so that I can set up the code programmatically. Okay, so in the view did load, the first thing I do is to call setup views. So what we do over here is that we set the background color to white, we add the two sub views, and then we just add the constraints over here. All right, so after setting up the view, we will fetch the users. This is the part where we make the API call. Okay, so as you can see over here, API manager.shed.fetch user. So if you are working in a company that has legacy code, you'll see that this is very common. And I'd like to maybe just gently hint to you that this is an extremely bad implementation. So please don't do that, because if I'm your colleague and you're doing this, I'll be very, very sad. Okay, because this code is not testable at all, and you want to not write this code as much as possible. I mean, of course, if you're building your own side projects and you just want to do a proof of concept, feel free to do this. But if you're working in a team, if you're working in a proper company building a real production app, please do not do this. Okay, and in this video I'm going to show you how we can transform this to professional code that is testable. Okay, so please keep watching this video because there's a lot of value in this. Okay, so we fetch the user, and then depending on the result case, if it's successful, we get the user object. And notice that the user object has a property called avatar, and this returns to us the image URL string. Okay, not the UI image, but the URL string. So we have to convert the URL string into data so that we can create a UI image from that. Okay, so as you can see over here, this is not the right way or the best way to convert a URL string into a UI image, but I mean, this is just the quick and dirty way to just get this to work. Okay, so in real life, you're probably going to use some kind of CocoaPods like SD web image to fill your image view with an image URL string. Okay, so what I do is that I convert the URL into a data. So as you can see, as data, and then I just construct a UI image over here and I assign it into the image view. Okay, so same goes for the email label. That's more straightforward. We just take from the user.email property. Okay, so over here, if there is a failure, okay, so I'm gonna do something over here for a while, guys. User not found. Sorry guys, this is error. I forgot to add this just now, so just give me one moment, guys. All right, so let me copy this. Okay, so as you can see, I have another Xcode project, and this is the completed version, and I'm going to show you how we can transform the old MVC to the MVVM version. All right, so this is what we are going to get at the end of this video. So as you can see, I have the view model over here. I have the view output. Okay, I have the API manager that conforms to a protocol, and I do have unit test that's written over here as well. So a lot of good stuff over here, so please keep watching. Okay guys, so let me come back to this. So this should not be correct. This should be this instead. Let image URL string equals to this. Sorry guys, I apologize. I mean, I should have fixed this earlier, but oh well. Okay, it should be like that. Okay, so I'm going to run the project right now, okay, and let's see what we have over here. Okay, so this is the success case, and therefore we are getting the image URL, which we convert into a data, and then we populate the image view as well as the email. Okay, so however, I want to show you the failure case right now. Okay, how am I going to mock a failure case? Basically, I just have to pass in an invalid URL. So I'm going to pass in, like, 5 over here. Okay, so definitely this is going to fail, and I'm going to put a breakpoint on line 56. Let's run this and let's see what happens over here. Okay, so yep, line 56 is being stopped at, and then let's just hit the play button, and notice that I have this this image over here, and this image is actually this one over here. All right. Okay, and then I also have the text no user found. Okay, so as you can see over here, let me just show it to you what this does. Okay, so this is the image that will be shown if there's a failure case. Okay, so now just imagine that this is a very simple example, but you can imagine that if you have a view controller that has a lot of complex logic, you want to ensure that this itself is a business logic. You want to make sure that you preserve its integrity, all right, such that you don't want your teammates to perform some refactoring and break your code. All right, so we want to make sure that this code is testable. All right, so what I'm going to do is to convert this into the MVVM model right now. Okay, so this is my little reference that I'm using. So from time to time, I might just bring this over. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is that we want to create a view model. Okay, so why do we want to create a view model? Is because we want to extract the business logic into another class. So most people, I mean, not most people, even myself, at the start, I'm very confused. Like, I don't know why Apple would name this as a UI view controller. Is this a view or is this a controller? All right, because controller, usually has business logic, and view generally should not have business logic. And in the event if your view needs to have business logic, then it should be extracted into a presenter class. Okay, we can talk about that next time. Okay, so let's start by creating a view model. So class. Okay, so I'm going to call this user view model. Okay, so just a very simple class over here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to have the view model inside the view controller. All right, so I'm going to do private let view model user view model. Okay, so this is actually called dependency injection. All right, so what I'm saying is that if you notice that if I don't have the init class over here, Xcode is going to complain, because Xcode is going to say, hey, who is going to supply your view model? Okay, so over here it says user view controller has no initializer, so we have to create the initializer, which is this one over here. Okay, so I'm going to do self.viewModel equals to view model. Okay, so Xcode is going to complain because we have to put in the required initializer, so I'm going to do it over here, as well as super.init here as well. Okay, so if I do a command B, this is not going to complain anymore. Should be good now. Oh, what's this? Okay, so over here, because we're initializing the user view controller inside the scene delegate, we have to pass in the view model as well. Okay, so let's do it over here. So let view model equals to user view model. Let's initialize this. And then let's just pass in the view model over here. View model, view model. All right, guys. So I hope that you guys can follow. It should be. I'm gonna go really slow so that you can understand it. And and this principle, this design principle, took me like 3 to 4 months to understand it fully. So if you are slow and you're confused, I don't blame you. Just feel free to watch the video several times. Okay. Okay. So what I want to do is that rather than the view controller rather than the view controller calling the API manager to fetch the user, instead I want to assign this responsibility into the view model instead. Okay, so inside the view model, I'm going to create a function over here. Let's call this fetch user. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Should we have a completion handler over here? And the answer is no, we don't want to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is rather than doing it this way, I'm going to comment out all this piece of code over here, and then I'm going to say view model dot fetch user. Okay, so notice there's no completion handler or anything like that. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to pass in a service over here. Okay, so rather than putting in API manager dot shared dot fetch user, okay, we don't want to do that. We want to have an instance of the service. Okay, so this is where the protocol comes in. Okay, so let's come down to the API manager and let's remove these two lines over here and let's create a protocol. Okay, so let's first find out what this function does. It fetches a user information. So I think for this protocol, I think it's okay to call this user service. Okay, so I'm going to copy this function signature over here and just paste this inside over here. And I'm going to say that this API manager conforms to user service. All right, so this is still going to compile. Command B, I believe this will still work. Okay, that's good. So now what I want to do is that let's come back to our user view model, and then I'm going to create another dependency over here. Let's call this user service. Okay, so you can imagine if, let's say, inside this API manager I have another function over here called fetch post, for instance. Okay, notice that inside this view model over here I will not be able to do fetch post because I'm only interested in this protocol. Okay, so let's inject this protocol inside this dependency inside. So let's do it this way. So self.userService equals to user service. Okay, so let me just remove this first. Let's do it one step at a time. Okay, so again, this is called dependency injection. Again, that means I can inject any concrete class that conforms to this signature over here. Okay, so let me do a command B, and it's going to break in the sim delegate, so let's fix that. Okay, so now the user view model has a dependency, and what is that? It is the user service. Okay, so we have to pass in some kind of class that conforms to this user service. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be our API manager. So user service equals to API manager. Okay, but notice that I'm not doing it this way. Okay, I'm not doing it this way. I'm doing it this way. Okay, so what I'm passing in is actually a protocol. Okay, and the protocol basically documents the contract, which means that API manager or any other class needs to conform to this user service function. So let's pass in the user service over here. Command B again, nothing should break. Okay, that's great. Now let's come back over here. So what we want to do is that now so user service dot fetch user result. Let's just switch through the result over here. So result, and then, so if you remember previously I said that we want to move all the business logic into the view model, so we are doing just that. Okay, so failure. Okay, so we don't really care about the error over here, okay, because we have an implementation that we already have an implementation for that already. Okay, so if this is successful, I want to return the user avatar as well as the user email. Okay, and if it's a failure case, I want to return this URL as well as the text that says user not found. Okay, so I'm going to copy this text over here. Okay, maybe I'm going to copy this one over here. Let's bring it up. failure case. Okay, so how is the user view controller going to listen to the user view model? All right, so the way I'm going to do that is to create something called an output, and this output is also a protocol. So let me show it to you what I mean by that. Okay, so I'm going to create a protocol over here. Let's call this user view model. Let's call this view output. Okay, or maybe just output. I think it's fine, output. Okay, and I'm going to create a function over here. Let's call this update view, and then I'm going to pass in the image URL string. Okay, I think image URL is fine. And then I'm going to pass in the email. All right, so why am I doing this? Why am I creating this protocol? It's because I want to have a contract between the user view model as well as the user view controller. All right, so now notice that the user view controller has a reference to the view model over here. Okay, but how is the view model going to talk back to the view controller? And the way I'm going to do it is via this output over here. Okay, so I'm going to do var output. This is of type user view model output. Okay, so over here inside this fetch user case, if this is a success case, I'm going to do output. All right, it's complaining here, and the reason is because I have to conform this to any object, I believe. Command B to build this, shouldn't complain. Okay, so if this is a success case, I'm going to do output dot update view, and what's the image URL? That would be the user dot avatar. Okay, if this is okay, and then I'm going to pass it the email over here. All right, so as you can see in the model, we have just the email and the avatar. We don't really need the ID, but I just put it there anyway. Okay, so the avatar is the image URL string. Okay, so over here, because we are in a closure, I have to add a weak self over here to prevent a memory leak. Okay, so over here, in the event of a failure, what do I want to return? Self.output, update view, and then I'm going to pass in this image URL string. Maybe let's call this error image URL, just like that. And then for the email, I want to put in no user file. So I'm just going to copy this and bring it back up over here. So no user file. Okay guys, I hope that you're following along. Okay, I'm going to build the app and it should compile correctly. Okay, now that I have moved this logic into the view controller, I think I can safely delete this. Okay, maybe not, I'll do that later. Okay, so now, how is the view controller going to receive this information from the view model? All right, the way is to conform to the delegate. So I'm going to do over here, self.viewModel.output equals to self. Okay, so you remember when you create like a table view, you do like table view dot data source equals to self, table view dot delegate equals to self. So this is similar. So rather than calling it delegate, I just use the variable output instead. But it's the same principle instead. It's the same principle essentially. Okay, so now it's going to complain, and why is that? It's because I have to conform to the user view model output. Okay, I'm going to copy this. All right, so again, I'm conforming to a protocol, which means I have to respect the contract and to implement the function. So let's do this at the bottom here. Okay, so I'm going to do it over here. I'm going to just add the mark over here, and then the function, if you remember, is called update view. All right, so once I receive this image URL and the email, I'm just going to update the image view as well as the label. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm just going to copy this. Just going to cheat a little bit. Okay, and uncomment this. And rather than having the image URL string, I think it should be this one instead. And then the email will be this instead. Alright guys, so I can remove this code now because I don't need that anymore. Alright, so let's recap. So in the view load, after we set up the views, we are going to call the fetch user method inside the view model. And then what happens is that this is like a listener. Alright, so when the API call is completed, we will receive this function, okay, and then we will update the views, the image view as well as the email label over here. Okay, so let's just hit the play button to run it, and let's see if this is working for us. All right, so let me bring up my, okay, so we see no user found, and that's because we kind of screw the the endpoint. So let's come down to the bottom and let's remove 5 over here, and let's just hit play. I believe we should see the lady photo as well as an email, and I believe if I change this to 3, it will also show a different user. Let's quickly have a look. Yep. Okay guys, so this is how we structure an MVVM application. Okay, so you might be wondering, why are we doing so much over here? We are making this like super complicated. We're creating a view model, we're creating another protocol, and then in our API manager we have to conform to another protocol. What's the point of all this? I used to think that way as well. Alright guys, so maybe let me just share a principle that I practice, and we should, as much as possible, make the view controller like a UI view. Alright, meaning to say we should make it as stateless as possible. Okay, so what does stateless means? It means that we don't want to have things like if, else, check for certain boolean over here. You'll see controllers that you have something like, oh, is something bool equals to false, and then in some parts of the code you'll be like, if is something, do this, else do that. This is going to really kill you in the long run, so you want to avoid this as, sorry, it should be a var here. You want to avoid this kind of code as much as possible. You want to put all these things inside the view model as much as possible. All right, you want to make your view controller as dumb as possible. All right, the goal of the view controller is mostly just to populate the views and then receive events from the user, like a button tap, or a tap gesture, or long press or whatsoever. Okay, so we want to bring all this logic inside the view model so that we can test it. Alright guys, so now let's start with the unit test. Okay, I hope that you guys are still staying along. Okay, so how do we create unit tests? Let's come over to our project and let's add a new target. So hit the plus button, and then I'm going to call this, I'm going to filter it by unit test. Okay, so I think we can just use the default product name, and let's just hit the finish button over here. Okay, so we have this new file over here. Okay, so it says protocol oriented programming test. The reason is because our project is called protocol oriented programming. Okay, so I'm going to remove this test performance here, and let's set up our tests. Okay, so what are we really testing for? Alright guys, so again, as I mentioned at the start, this is just a very simple example. We are making an API call, and then according to the result of the API call, we are either showing the image, or we are showing an error image and defaulting the email to the text no user found. So we're going to test these two behavior. We're going to say that, hey, if API call is successful, we are going to populate this. Otherwise, we want to make sure that we show this error image URL, and we want to update the email as no user found. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing to do is that let's identify what are we testing for. Are we testing for the view controller, No, we are not. We are testing for the view model because that's where all the logic, the business logic resides. Okay, so let's do private var. Why is it private? It's because we don't need to access this variable outside of this class. So let's call this SUT, okay, and that's the convention. So SUT stands for system under test, and what we are interested in is the user view model. Okay, Xcode is nice to auto add this line for me. So if yours is not showing up, just ensure that you have this line inside over here. And what this line means is that this file, okay, so notice that this file's target's membership is in a different target, okay? And what this line does is that it imports, it basically gives us access to the files inside the user view controller, all right? So now I want to set up this SUT over here. So SUT equals to user view model. Okay, so we have to pass in some kind of user service over here. Okay, so if we are to pass in the API manager, then we are unable to control the behavior. So what we're going to do is that we're going to mock this user service. Okay, so right at the bottom over here, so notice that user service is a protocol that has one function. So we are only interested to modify that part. Okay, so let's call this mock user service, and then this will be user service. Okay, so Xcode is going to complain, so let's let Xcode do its thing. Let's hit on the die. Okay, all right, over here. Okay, so fetch user. All right, so if we are using the API manager, then we are really dependent on what the network returns to us with regards to, you know, whether it's success or failure. But because we mock it, we are able to decide what we want to return. Okay, so I know this might sound a little bit advanced for you, but as I type this in, you might understand this a lot better. All right, so I'm going to do var fetch user mock result. So I'm going to mock this result, which means I can basically change this as much as I please. Okay, so this is going to be of type result, user, or error. Okay, so just like that. Okay, so I'm going to say if let result equals to fetch user mock result, then I'm going to do the completion over here. I'm going to pass in result over here. So basically what this does is that it allows me to just assign what I want the result to be, whether it's success or whether it's failure. Okay, you'll see it in a short while. Okay, so over here I'm going to do private var user service, and this shouldn't be this. It should be the mock user service itself. Okay, so and I'll show you, and I'll let you know why. Okay, so I'm going to create let user service, not let user service equals to mock user service, and I'm going to initialize this. Okay, and the reason why this is a mock user service instead of a user service is because I can manipulate via this mock user service class. Okay, so what I mean, okay, I'll show it to you later inside the test functions. Okay, so just hang on with me over here, and I'm going to pass this inside. Okay, no drama so far, all good. Let's hit the diamond button and let's just run the unit test, and it should pass because nothing is being written yet. Okay, it should pass, so you should see the nice green diamonds over here. So let's also work on the, okay, I think I need to do super.setup with error. So this is just for good code hygiene, and let's do and we need to put a try in front because we have a throws over here. Okay, for the tear down with error, so we have to de-init everything. So let's do SUT equals to nil. Let's do user service equals to nil. Again, for code hygiene, let's do try super.teardown with error, just like that. Let's hit the diamond buttons again, and this should compile successfully. All right, green diamonds, great. Okay, so what do we want to test for? All right, there's actually something else that I've not done, so maybe let me just I'll do that just in a while. Okay, so I think you can follow my chain of thoughts. Okay, so we're gonna test update views. Test update view when API, maybe let's call this on API success, shows image and email. Okay, I don't think I need the throw over here. All right, so we're going to test that it will update the view every time the API is successful, and it will show the image and the email. Okay, we're going to add another test. Again, we're going to test the update view method on API failure shows error image and default no user found text. Okay, is it no user found? Let's come back here, and yeah, no user found. All right, so we want to test for these two behaviors so that if your teammate performs a refactor and breaks it, he must pay the price. All right, let's get started. Okay, so every time when you write tests, we have this little boilerplate over here, given, when, then. So, oops, it should be at the top over here. So given means what are the circumstances, what are the variables involved. When refers to when something happens, then what is the expected result. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to do sut dot fetch user. And what is given? Given would be what is the event that is happening. So given that user service, all right, so notice now I'm going to say user service is the mock user service. I can now mock the result. I can say success now, and let's create a user equals to user, maybe one, email would be me@gmail.com, and the avatar would be, I don't know, https pixum.com/ okay, it doesn't matter, any URL is fine. Okay, so I'm going to pass in the user over here. So what I'm saying is that, hey, given this result, the user, when user service calls fetch user, this is the result that I want to mock. Then I can do xct assert. Okay, so now this is the part where I'm asserting that the update view will return to me me@gmail.com, as well as this URL string over here. So how am I going to do that? Okay, so let's come back to the user view model again, and let's re-examine how does the view model talk to the view controller. And it's via this output. All right, so it's via this output. So what that means is that we have to mock that output, or rather we have to create that output so that we can read what the output is speaking to the view controller. All right, are you confused yet? If you are, give yourself a pat on the back. That means that you are learning something. Okay, so take this positively. Okay, so we have to create the view output over here. So let's do class, and this class is mock user view output. Okay, and then let's call this user service. Oh shucks, what is that called? I forgot. User view model output. All right, guys, my bad. Okay, so I'm gonna call this mock user view model output. Okay, so over here, this class is conforming to this protocol, and this protocol is that has this function called update view. Okay, so what's going to happen is that I can read every time this function is being called. I want to read what the image URL and the email is. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is that I'm going to create an array over here. Let's call this the update view array. Okay, so notice that I want to capture these two information over here. So I'm going to make this an array, but it is a tuple, okay, because there is two information that I want to capture over here. If it's just one piece of information, probably an array, a string array is good enough, okay. So I'm going to pass in image URL string, email string, just like that. So I'm going to say that every time this update view is being called, I'm going to append a new element, and this element is a tuple. Why? Because of this over here. So I'm going to pass in the image URL as well as the email over here. Alright guys, not too confused yet, I hope. Okay, so let's remove the empty lines, and let's let me just comment this, and let's run the test to ensure that nothing is breaking yet. Is something breaking yet? Oh, it has no initializers. Oh, why is that? Because this has to be an empty array. Alright, now this should work. Let's run the test one more time. Okay, everything is green, it's good. Alright guys, so now I can do the assertion now, okay? So I can create this view output over here, output, and this view output again is this mock user view model output. Okay, maybe I shouldn't call this view output, maybe let me just call this output. View model output. Okay, cool. So let's create this over here. So output equals to mock user view output. Let's initialize this, and then I have to make sure to say that the SUT, which is the view model dot output, equals to output. Alright, so what this means is that every time the view model outputs something, it will output into this mock view model output over here, which is this function over here. Okay, so I'm going to put a breakpoint over here to illustrate to you what I mean by that. Okay, so now when I call the fetch user, I can say that the output dot update view array. So this update view array is this guy over here. I'm going to say that the count is 1. Okay, it means that every time I call fetch user, I expect the output to be updated here. Okay, so let me just quickly run this to show to you what I mean. Okay, so let's run this, and then notice that now we are on line 59, and if we see this, I don't know what window you call this, but notice that the email is me@gmail.com, which is this over here, and the image URL is this one over here. So basically we can do our assertion this way. Okay, so I'm going to say assert equal output dot update view array. Okay, since I know that the count is only 1, so I'm going to choose the first element. I'm going to say that the email must be me@gmail.com. Okay, similarly, let me just copy this, and then this will be the avatar. Oh, it's not the avatar this time because the function name is called image URL, so it should be this over here. Alright, so I'm going to remove this breakpoint, and let's run this one more time. Alright guys, stay along. I know this is 45 minutes and I hope you're going strong. Okay guys, it passes. Now let's do the second one over here. Okay, so what are we testing for this time? We are testing the update view function. When there's an API failure, we want to receive the error image as well as the default no user found text. Okay, so so this time we don't need to create the user anymore because we know that this is a failure. So given when then, so given we can say user service. So this is us mocking the behavior. I'm going to say that this is a failure case. And what is the error? I mean, we can pass in any error we like. We can create a custom error, but I think we can just do NS error just like that. Okay, it doesn't really matter. And then when I fetch the user, then I will also expect to receive an event inside the update view function. Okay, but notice now, okay, let me just copy this over here. Okay, and now I'm able to test for the email and the image URL over here. Okay, so let me just quickly run this first and then you'll see what I mean. Okay, so now notice the test is going to fail. Why? It's because when the API failure happens, the output should be no user found. So it says over here that no user found is not equals to me@gmail.com. All right, so if you come back over here to your view controller, this should be the email that is being written, or rather this should be the text that we are going to populate in our email text view. So I'm going to paste it over here, and then in the same way, let's copy this, let's paste this over here. All right, so if I'm to run the second test, this is going to pass. All right guys, this is how you write your unit test. Okay, so I'm going to run both tests together and we should expect to see both tests passing. All right, great. So this is what I want to share with you guys. All right, so what is the situation that can happen where this structure really adds value to your team? So just imagine one of your new joiner comes along and he says, hey, I don't really like this icon over here. I want to change to something else. And he says, let me just increase the resolution, 1024. All right, he thinks that this looks a lot better. Or maybe he changes this, for example. And you guys probably have your own CI, which is going to run the unit test. And notice that when the test is being written, he will see an error. The error is on the second test over here. And notice what it says over here. It says that, hey, 1024.jpg is different from 512.png, and he won't be able to merge his commit, which is a good thing because he has to fix it before he can merge it into master. Alright guys, I hope that this exercise is useful, and thanks for staying along. I know this is close to an hour, and I'll be providing the project so that you can take a look, and feel free to just drop some comments if you think that if you have learned something, if you have questions, feel free to put that down as well. And if there are other topics that you want me to run through, just feel free to put them in the comments as well, and I'll see what I can do. Alright guys, it's really late now. It's 1:40 a.m. now, and I think I have to turn in soon. Alright guys, cheers. I'll see you soon. Bye.